Welcome, dear listener, to a peaceful journey into the heart of one of the world's greatest mysteries, the Easter Island statues, or moai. Tonight, we invite you to leave behind the noise of everyday life and drift softly into a realm where history, legend, and nature intertwine. Have you ever wondered how these massive stone figures came to stand silently upon this remote island, carved by hands long gone, yet still watching over the land? As you listen, let the gentle sounds of the island's breeze and the calm narration carry you away, soothing your mind and calming your spirit. Together, we'll explore the stories of the Rapa Nui people, their culture, their challenges, and the enduring legacy carved in stone that continues to inspire awe and wonder. So find a comfortable place, take a deep breath, and prepare to relax as we step softly into the ancient world of Easter Island. The fire crackled softly, a gentle rhythm like the pulse of a slow and ancient heart. Beyond the glow of the flames, the night stretched into endless darkness, pierced only by the silver shimmer of stars scattered across the southern sky. A breeze moved gently through the tall grasses, carrying with it the scent of salt and earth, of distant tides and forgotten time. There, beneath that tapestry of constellations, stood the watchers. They did not speak, they did not move, and yet in their silence they told stories older than memory, tales not spoken aloud, but carried on the wind and whispered through the stone. The moai. Their presence was both calming and immense, like standing in the shadow of a mountain that chose to rise not from earth, but from memory itself. Towering figures carved from volcanic stone, their faces weathered by centuries of sun and sea, they stood with their backs to the ocean, gazing inland as though still protecting a people long faded into mist. Have you ever wondered why they face that way? Why their solemn eyes never look toward the crashing waves behind them, but instead toward the sleeping hills and gentle slopes of the island? Perhaps tonight, in the hush of this moment, you'll find part of the answer. So let us settle in. Close your eyes if you like, and breathe with the rhythm of the sea. Let the sounds of this ancient place wash over you. The crackle of fire, the sigh of wind, the eternal hush of waves upon distant shores. Tonight, I will tell you a story. Not a tale of war or conquest. No, this is a different kind of story. One told in footsteps on ancient soil, in carvings etched by quiet hands, in the careful placement of stone upon stone. A story made for sleeping minds and wandering hearts. It begins not with a hero, but with an island. A quiet island. So remote it feels like the last place the world remembers. It is called Rapa Nui now, but long ago, to those who first found it, it was simply the land at the end of all journeys. A triangle of earth adrift in the endless blue, shaped by fire, wind, and time. The island rose from the sea like a dream, born from the mouths of volcanoes, softened by centuries of rain, and touched by the hands of those who came seeking a new life. Those first voyagers, what must they have seen? Canoes gliding across vast Pacific waters, guided only by stars and instinct, by faith in the memory of sky maps and stories passed down through generations. They came with hope in their hearts and fire in their small vessels, bringing with them seeds, tools, dreams, and silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the kind that fills you when the horizon stretches farther than thought. The island welcomed them. It offered tall palms and fresh springs, fish that shimmered in the surf, birds that nested in high cliffs. The land was untouched, sacred, waiting. They built homes from reeds and stone, lit fires that danced in the dark, sang songs beneath the open sky. And slowly, over generations, the island became theirs. They were the Rapa Nui people. But you and I, tonight, will call them simply the Keepers of Stone. The fire before us dims now, its light a soft amber glow, flickering low on the ground. Shadows stretch out like long fingers. The Moai, those quiet giants, watch us still, their features etched not with emotion, but with stillness. Their elongated noses, the deep furrows of their brows, the silent curve of their lips, they all speak of something just out of reach. As if we listened just a little longer, we might hear them whisper. Do you feel it? That hush? That ancient hush? Good. That means the story has begun to settle in your bones. Let us continue. The people of the island lived in harmony with their world. The Rapa Nui were not warriors, not at first. They were navigators, astronomers, gardeners, and artists. They read the stars as others read books, and they sowed fields with care. Sweet potatoes, taro, bananas, food that fed both body and spirit. They knew the winds. They knew the ways of birds and the rhythm of tides. And they knew stone. Always the stone. From the great volcanic heart of the island, Rano Raraku, they carved figures unlike any the world had seen. Colossal heads with powerful jaws, long ears, solemn eyes. Some believed these statues were ancestors made immortal. Others, messengers between worlds. All agreed, the Moai held mana, a sacred energy that pulsed through stone like blood through veins. Each statue was a prayer, a monument, a memory. But how did they lift them? How did they move those massive monoliths, some weighing more than 14 tons, without the wheel, without metal, without beasts of burden? Ah, but that is a question for another chapter. For now, imagine the stillness of Rano Raraku, the quarry where the Moai were born. It is evening. The mountain glows red in the setting sun. A child walks with his grandfather, tracing the outlines of statues half buried in grass and earth. The wind carries the scent of flowers and smoke. The air hums with unseen stories. Grandfather, the boy asks, why do the statues sleep? The old man smiles and kneels beside one great head, his hand resting on the cool stone. They do not sleep, he says softly. They listen. To what? To us, to time, to the island. And what do they hear? Everything we forget. So, let us forget nothing tonight. Let us walk through the veil of centuries together, without fear, without hurry. The Moai will be our guides, the stars our map, the earth beneath us steady and kind. You are safe here. And when sleep calls to you, as it surely, imagine a world where the sea has no end, where the sky stretches in all directions and the stars are your only compass. Long before maps were drawn, before countries had names, and long before the Moai stood in their silent rows, there was only the sea and those brave enough to cross it. Tonight, let us drift back through centuries like a canoe gliding over gentle waves. Let the hush of water, the soft rhythm of paddles, and the creaking of wood cradle your thoughts. You are not lost. You are only arriving at the beginning. The people came in long, narrow boats, carved from great tree trunks and shaped by the knowledge of generations. Their sails were woven from palm fibers, their ropes braided from hibiscus bark, and their dreams carried in the stories whispered beneath the stars. They were Polynesians, masters of the ocean. Their journey to Rapa Nui was not a mistake, nor was it an accident. It was guided by stars, by birds, by the way the swell of the sea changed when land was near, and by hope. Always hope. No one knows the name of the first to set foot on the island. No record remains of the moment when paddle touched sand, when calloused hands gripped new earth, or when the first footprints marked the volcanic soil. But that moment happened, quiet, steady, sacred. And the island received them. A place so remote that for centuries it would know only their presence. Volcanoes loomed in the distance, silent now, their fires long cooled. The ground was rich, the winds were kind. Groves of tall palm trees swayed along the cliffs. Birds soared above in great numbers, and fish shimmered in the clear shallows. There were no enemies, no war, no other people. Only the island and its new caretakers. The people named it, not with words we might recognize today, but with meaning. The name, passed down from breath to breath, held reverence and gratitude. The land was not a possession. It was a living being, a spirit with moods and memories. It had to be honored. So they honored it. They built with care, homes shaped like boats turned upside down, their roofs made of reeds and leaves. They planted gardens with sweet potato, yam, taro, and sugarcane. They fished with nets crafted from twisted fibers and hooks carved from bone. And at night they told stories of the sea, of the stars, of the gods who watched from above. Each child grew up hearing tales of Hiva, the ancestral land from which they had come from, a place of plenty now lost to time and tide. And so Rapa Nui became more than a new home. Let me tell you of a woman named Anaru. She lived in the time of the first settlers, though no records remain. Her name, like all names then, was a sound carried on wind and woven into memory. Anaru was a gatherer of herbs. She walked barefoot through fields kissed by sea mist, her eyes keen for the shape of healing leaves and fragrant roots. She knew where the good water flowed, which trees whispered of rainfall, and which winds carried messages from far-off places. In the early days, Anaru was among the first to notice something peculiar. When she sat beneath a certain cliff, the wind seemed to hum. Not like the whistle of breeze through leaves, but something deeper. A sound that pulsed through the stone itself. A whisper not of words, but of presence. "It is the voice of the land," she told her son Tere as they gathered berries one dusk. "It remembers. Even before we stepped here, it was listening." Tere was young, curious, and full of questions. Who is it listening to? To the sea, to the stars, and now to us. That night they lit a small fire beneath the cliff, and as the flames danced, Anaru sang, not loudly, not boldly, but softly, like a lullaby. a song for the stone, a gift to the island. Some say that was the beginning of the moai, not the carving, but the idea. That stone could listen, that stone could remember. And so began the long love story between the Rapa Nui and their island. With each passing season, they grew more attuned to its rhythms. They traced the migration of seabirds, studied the swell of waves. They noticed how shadows fell differently in the winter, and how the sun returned to the same place each solstice. These patterns became part of their lives, woven into ritual, into belief, into song. There were no temples of gold, no great cities of marble. Only earth, sky, fire, water, stone, and memory. One evening, generations after Anaru's time, a boy named Manu stood on a high hill. He watched the stars blink into being above the horizon. He held a piece of red stone in his hand, smooth, warm from the sun. He had found it near Rano Raraku, the sacred mountain where the people now gathered stone for something new. Something no one had done before. Carving the ancestors. Manu did not understand the full meaning yet, but as he traced the lines of the stone, he felt something stir. Not just imagination, but connection. The kind that comes when you know you're standing where someone once stood, doing what someone once dreamed, dreaming what someone once dreamed. That night, as he lay beside his family's fire, he whispered to the stars, "I will help shape them." Not statues, he meant, but memories. And so, the first footsteps became paths. The paths became patterns. The patterns became purpose. And slowly, with gentleness and care, the story of the moai began to take shape. Not in stone yet, but in spirit. That is how all sacred things begin, with footsteps. Let your breath settle, like fine dust on quiet stone. Let your mind soften, like clouds passing over morning hills. Let the world become still. Now, imagine a mountain. It rises from the heart of the island, not grand or snow-capped, but worn and wise. Its name is Rano Raraku. The people did not see it as just a mountain. They called it the cradle of the moai, the womb of memory, the echoing stone. It was here, on its slopes, among its ridges, and deep within its heart, that the ancestors began to take form. And it is here, dear listener, that we now gently walk. The quarry was alive, not with movement, but with presence. Each boulder that jutted from the earth seemed to hold a breath. Each hollow carved in the mountain seemed to whisper, and the air, always still, hummed faintly with the rhythm of chisels echoing through time. Rano Raraku was not loud. It never needed to be. It waited for hands, for vision, for faith. The Rapa Nui people did not rush. Stone was not something to conquer. It was something to understand. Carvers approached the mountain with quiet hearts. They would sit beside a chosen cliff, sometimes for days, simply listening, watching how the light touched the surface, how the rain rolled over its face, and how the stars aligned above it at night. Only when the moment felt right did they begin. With basalt tools, simple, rough, shaped by fire, they tapped gently. Each chip, each flake fell like petals, the beginnings of a face, A long nose, a strong brow, eyes that would never open, yet always see. They carved not just statues, but spirits, memories made solid, stories given form. One elder named Hakoa was known as the Stone Dreamer. He never spoke while carving. Some said he was listening to the stone itself. Others believed he had the gift to see the face of an ancestor in his sleep and would wake knowing exactly where to carve. He taught the younger ones not just where to strike, but when to pause. "Listen," he would whisper, resting his fingers on the rock. "It remembers more than we do. We are not creating, we are revealing." Around him, the mountain slowly changed. Statues lay in various states of becoming. Some almost complete, still clinging to the rock. Others half-carved, their features just beginning to emerge. A few stood upright, proud and silent, as if testing their shape against the sky. There were dozens, no hundreds, each different, each sacred. To walk through Ranoraraku was to walk through memory. The wind passed gently between the statues, rustling through grass, stirring dust. Sometimes it sounded like a voice, a chant, or a name long forgotten. Children came to the quarry too, not to carve, but to watch. They sat in circles on the slope, eating roasted yams wrapped in leaves, listening to the old ones tell stories. Stories of gods who walked the earth before time, of stars that once rested on mountaintops, of a great canoe that brought their people here, guided by birds that never slept. The quarry became not just a place of work, but of wonder. Laughter echoed, songs were sung, and as the sun dipped low behind the cliffs, fires were lit. Flames danced across the statues' faces, casting long shadows across the mountain. The Noai looked as if they breathed, as if they turned ever so slightly when no one was watching. One evening, a young girl named Nia wandered too far. She had been chasing the glimmer of a butterfly, its wings the color of fire. As she rounded a curve of stone, she found herself before a statue still embedded in the earth, its head tilted toward the sky, as if in thought. Nia sat. The wind was quiet there, caught in the curve of the mountain. She could hear her own breathing and the quiet rhythm of her heart. Then a whisper, soft, not frightening, no more than a lullaby carried by the breeze. It seemed to say, "We watch so you may remember." Nia told no one, not because she was afraid, but because she knew not all whispers were meant to be spoken aloud. Some were for keeping, some for carrying. And so the Moai were born, one by one, year after year. They were not idols, they were not decorations. They were bridges between the living and the dead, between memory and stone, between earth and sky. The Rapa Nui did not see themselves as separate from the statues. They saw themselves as caretakers of legacy. Stone was not cold. It was warm with meaning. When the time came to move a Moai from the quarry, the process began with ritual. The carvers gathered before dawn, offering chants to the mountain. The statue would be carefully released from its cradle, its back finally freed from the rock that had held it for so long. A new chapter would begin. But that is a story for another night. Close your eyes.
Feel the breath of the ocean beyond the hills. Feel the hush of the grass brushing against bare ankles. And listen. There is a sound older than words, a rhythm deeper than drums. It is the sound of stone learning to walk. This is the chapter where silence moves, where giants leave their cradle, and the land remembers each of their steps. On a morning cloaked in mist, when dew clung to every leaf and spiderweb shimmered like silver nets, the people gathered at the base of Rano Raraku. The statue had been freed, its back released from the embrace of the mountain. A moai now stood upright, towering, heavy, yet strangely graceful. It had no legs, yet the elders said it would walk, not with feet, but with faith. The Rapa Nui believed the moai held mana, a sacred power drawn from ancestors and passed down through stone. To move such a being was not merely a feat of strength, but a ritual. Before anything began, chants filled the air, low and slow, like the heartbeat of the earth. Drums joined in, not loud, but steady, like footsteps forming in the future. Offerings were placed at the statue's feet, woven garlands, crumbs of sweet potato, a bowl of fresh water sprinkled with herbs. Children watched with wide eyes. They were told the moai could only walk when the people were united, when voices, hands, and hearts moved as one. And so the ropes were tied, thick, braided from hemp and bark, strong like ancestral arms. One group stood on the left, another on the right, and slowly, slowly, they began to pull. Not forward, but side to side. A gentle sway. Then again, a rock, a shift. The statue leaned, then returned. A hush fell, then joy. It moved, just a little, but enough. "They are walking," someone whispered, and the name stuck. The walking statues. Step by step, hours passed like flowing water. The statue tilted left, tilted right, swayed forward. Dust rose softly from the path, settling on the feet of the watchers. It was not a straight journey. Sometimes the moai paused for days, as if thinking. Sometimes ropes broke, and all would sit quietly, waiting for the next safe moment. But always they moved on, patient, together. The path from the quarry to the ahu, the stone platforms waiting near the sea, was long. It wound through valleys, across gentle hills, past groves of banana and fig, through land both sacred and silent. Along the way, songs were sung, songs that named each statue, songs that reminded the pullers of their lineage, songs to keep rhythm when muscles grew tired. Children walked alongside with palm leaves, fanning both workers and statue. Old women carried gourds of water, whispering encouragement to the wind. Even the dogs seemed to walk in step. And above all, the sky watched. One evening, the caravan stopped beside a grove of toramiro trees. Fires were lit. The statue, now halfway on its journey, was covered with cloth to rest. As stars emerged one by one, an elder named Ure knelt beside a young carver named Moani. He said, "Do you know why the moai walk?" Moani shook his head.
Ure smiled. Because they carry the eyes of those before us. They remember what we have forgotten, and they must be placed where they can see again. There were tales of a time when all the Moai would turn their faces inland, toward the villages. They were guardians, watchers, keepers of balance between the people and the land. When a Moai reached its final place, it was not simply dropped. It was welcomed. A feast was held. Songs danced through the air, and the Moai, still solemn, was lifted onto its platform with ceremony. There it stood, forever silent, forever watching. Sometimes people would return to the path later. They would find smooth places in the earth, soft impressions where a statue had rested, or small stones pressed into the ground like offerings. They would sit there in quiet. Perhaps in the whisper of the leaves, they would hear echoes of ropes pulling, of chants rising, of stone learning to walk. And so the statues spread across the island, from hill to bay, like stars fallen from the sky and turned to stone. Each one a name, a memory, a prayer. Each one walked by hands now dust, feet now still, but stories that live on in the very shape of the earth. The statues had walked. They had arrived. They stood now tall and solemn upon their stone platforms, Ahu, facing inland, watching over the homes, the trees, the people. But they were not yet awake. Not until they had eyes. And so begins another sacred chapter, soft as morning mist, weightless as breath, yet full of the hush of reverence. At dawn, when the ocean still whispered and the island wore its robe of dew, the people gathered once more. This time there were no ropes, no pulling, no swaying giants, only quiet hands, stone tools, and sacred coral. In the shade of the tamano trees, a group of artisans, those chosen by lineage and patience, began their work on the most delicate of pieces, the eyes. Unlike the bodies, carved from volcanic tuff, the eyes were made of coral, white and glistening, soft as sea bone. Each one carefully cut and polished, not by haste, but with song. The outer parts would be inlaid with coral, and the pupils, the pupils, were black volcanic glass, obsidian, smooth and deep as the night sea. These were not merely decorations. No, they were the final breath, the soul's mirror. The moment the eyes were set in place, the Moai would be alive, able to see, to guard, to remember. The ceremony was known as giving the eyes. It was rare, solemn, beautiful in its stillness. Children were kept at a distance, but they watched with awe, faces round with wonder. Drums were silent that day. Instead, a flute played, low, slow, as if echoing across vast stone halls of memory. Women chanted softly. Elders stood barefoot on the stone platform, whispering names of those who had come before. The eyes were lifted with care. Hands did not tremble. They were trained, steady, sacred. As the first eye was set, a hush fell so complete, even the seabirds ceased their crying. The coral shimmered in the sunlight. The obsidian glinted like the last tear of a long-forgotten god. And suddenly, though the Moai had not moved, though it remained stone, it watched. The people could feel it. They said the statue now saw the living and the dead, the growing and the crumbling, the promises made and the ones broken. It was not fear the people felt. No, it was presence, a sense that their ancestors now stood among them, their gaze eternal, their wisdom embedded in silent stone. Villagers left gifts at the feet of the newly opened moai. Shell necklaces, smooth pebbles from the shore, the first banana of the season, a tiny carving of a canoe. Children bowed before it. Old men touched their foreheads to the platform. Mothers held their babies high, offering their names to be remembered. Not every statue received eyes. Some remained asleep, by choice or by forgotten right. But those who did, they changed the village. People said that crops grew better near them. Fish returned to bays they once avoided. Arguments quieted faster under their gaze. It was as though the land remembered how to listen, once the moai learned how to see. There is a saying, passed in whispers. The stone speaks when the eyes awaken. Some believe that if you sit in silence long enough near one of these statues and watch the shimmer in its coral eye, you may remember things you've never known. A name not yours, a scent from long ago, a lullaby sung before your birth. Because perhaps the moai do not only see outward, perhaps they also see inward, into the folds of time, into the dreams of stone and sky. One night, a young girl named Kaipo sat by the base of the statue her grandfather had helped raise. She placed a flower behind her ear and whispered, "Do you see me?" A soft wind brushed her cheek. The leaves rustled gently above. And though no voice answered, she smiled. She felt seen. And so the statues remain, watching, not just over the island, but over all who come with quiet hearts and open minds. Their eyes are still, but their silence speaks. There had always been trees. Tall ones with wide trunks that reached for the sun and whispered ancient songs when the winds passed through. They had stood like silent sentinels along the ridges, their roots clutching the volcanic earth, their leaves brushing against stars. The island had once worn a cloak of green, palm groves, thickets of toromiro, groves of sandalwood and soft-leafed shrubs. Birds nested in high branches. The people built canoes from their trunks. The soil was shaded, moist, held tight in the embrace of tangled roots. But change, like sleep, often begins softly. And so it was not noticed at first. A tree cut here to carve a canoe for the fishermen. Another one felled to raise a new ahu stone platform. Wood for fire, wood for homes, wood for the sacred drums that beat during the moon festivals, wood to transport the moai giants from quarry to coast. So many needed, so many moved. And with each statue raised, a forest bowed and vanished in silence. There were still birdsong and shade in those days, but the songs grew fewer, the shade less deep. Children began asking, "Where did the trees go?" And the elders would answer with old words. They are gifts, and gifts must be used with thanks. And they were thankful, always. But even thanks cannot stop a leaf from falling once the wind has taken it. One day, a young boy named Ruki wandered to the island's edge, where once had stood a forest thick and humming. He remembered it, just barely,
how it felt cool even in the heat of midday. But now only stumps remained, like broken teeth in a forgotten jaw. He sat upon one, his hands dusty with dry soil, and listened. But there was no rustling above, no dappled light on his face, only the open sky and the distant cry of a seabird. And in the stillness, he realized the trees were not coming back. The ground began to change too. Without roots to hold it, the soil loosened, washed down in the rains, blown out by the winds. Crops grew thinner. The yams did not swell like they used to. The banana groves grew weary. And the birds, those that nested in the highest branches, began to vanish too. The people spoke less of the forests, not out of forgetfulness, but out of quiet grief. They built fences from stone instead of wood. They fished more. They walked farther each day to gather what the land once gave freely.
Still, the moai stood, silent, watchful. Their eyes, when open, gazed upon the barren hills, as if remembering the groves that once danced behind them. Some whispered that the moai, now surrounded by emptiness, grew heavy with sorrow, that the ancestors within could feel the ache of the land. One elder said, "When the trees sleep, the island dreams of loss." But no one really knew. The statues did not speak. They never had. And yet, everyone listened. One night, the winds came stronger than before. The villagers huddled inside their homes, listening to the howls that once would have been caught and softened by forest walls. Roofs creaked, dust swirled in through cracks. The sea roared louder, crashing closer to the cliffs. Kaipo, now a young woman, woke from a dream she could not remember. She stepped outside and looked toward the moai. In the moonlight, they looked unchanged, strong, eternal. But she felt something, as though the statues were bracing themselves for a silence even deeper than before. The island was not dying, not yet, but it was forgetting parts of itself. And the people, too, had begun to change. Their stories shifted. Some songs fell away. New ones emerged, sung in lower tones, full of remembering and longing. Still, they worked the land. Still, they prayed. Still, they placed coral eyes in the moai and left offerings at their feet. But they no longer danced beneath trees, for there were none to dance beneath. Perhaps the island was teaching them. Perhaps the ancestors were waiting. Or perhaps this was simply the way of things. Rising, falling, becoming, forgetting, remembering. Just as waves reach for the shore and then return to the sea. And so, the forests vanished. But the wind remained. And in it, if you listen, truly listen, you might still hear the whisper of a leaf that once was. You might feel it brush your cheek, like a memory too soft to hold, but too real to forget. The days still began with sunrise, and the songs of the sea still hummed along the edges of the island. But something had shifted in the air. It was not a loud change, no shouting, no sudden storm, just a hush between words, a glance held a second too long, a question that went unanswered. The island, once whole in its breath and rhythm, had begun to divide. It started with the land. The fields near the coast, once rich and moist with forest shade, grew tired. The yams shrank. The sweet potatoes turned dry and thin. Even the taro leaves curled at the edges, as if sighing in protest. Those who lived near the fertile slopes of the volcano still had food. Their gardens, kissed by the misty highlands, bore fruit longer. They shared at first, as they always had. But when the soil below failed to yield, and the wind brought dust instead of rain, those on the coast began to ask for more. And those above began to say no. Villages that once danced together at the harvest moon now kept their fires closer, their voices lower. There were no fences, no need, but invisible lines began to run between clans, lines drawn by hunger and watered by fear. Kaipo noticed it first in the children. Where once they played together, chasing crabs and carving little moai in the sand, now they played in groups that matched their homes. Mountain children, coastal children, not out of cruelty, but from stories passed quietly through mothers' lips at night. "Don't go too far," one mother whispered. "They're not like us anymore." The statues watched it all, still, unblinking, unmoved. But some began to wonder. Was it the statues that had caused this? Had too many been raised? Too many trees cut? Had they brought fortune once and now demanded more in return? The questions were never asked aloud, not directly, but in dreams and in the quiet spaces between chants, some wondered. Ruki, now taller and leaner, sat often with the elders. He listened. Old Korotane spoke one dusk as they sat near an ancient Ahu platform, its moai half buried in soil and creeping moss. "We carved them to remember," the elder said, his eyes cloudy like sea glass. "But now we carve to compete, to prove we still matter." Ruki didn't answer, but he looked at the half-formed moai nearby, its face barely emerging from stone, and wondered what it would say if it could speak. The great ceremonies continued, but with less joy. The food was rationed, the dances shorter, the drums thinner in sound. Priests from different clans began speaking of different ancestors, different destinies. Some declared their lineage from the stars, others from the earth's fire. The unity once found in shared myth now splintered into belief and pride. And pride, when sharpened by hunger, becomes a blade. One night, a statue fell. No one admitted to pushing it, but it was one from the lowlands, its coral eyes shattered on the rocks. The villagers above said it was time, that the ancestors were displeased. The villagers below said it was no accident, that someone had made it fall. No fights broke out, not yet, but many fires burned that night, each village facing inward, their backs to the others. Still, some remembered. Kaipo walked to the fallen statue the next morning. She lit a small fire near its base, not to cook, but to warm the space with quiet presence. She placed a shell necklace by the broken face. Ruki joined her. They said nothing, only listened, to the wind, to the sea, to the silence between stories. The division of the island had no clear moment of beginning. It grew, like vines in a forgotten garden, twisting slowly around the hearts of good people, people afraid of losing what little they still had. There was still kindness,
Still laughter in corners, but the balance had tilted. And the moai, once symbols of shared reverence, now watched over divided ground. In time, the people would give this fracture a name. They would call it the time of long shadows, when trust grew thin and ancestors were claimed like flags. But for now, no one named it. They simply lived it, step by step, word by word. And all the while, the island listened.
The first egg was found at dawn. Cradled in the shallow curve of a cliffside nest, perched high above the crashing sea, it gleamed in the misty morning light, white and perfect, fragile as hope. It belonged to the Manu Tara, the sooty tern that came each year in early spring, a bird that crossed oceans without maps, always returning, always faithful. The Rapa Nui had watched them for generations, but now, with the old ways faltering, they watched differently. This egg, this sky-born gift, would become the heart of a new tradition. The Birdman ritual, whispered first as an idea in council fires, grew into a ceremony. Not just a contest, but a bridge. A chance to bring balance, not through blood, but through bravery. Each clan, now more distinct in name and purpose, would send forth one champion, a swift, silent youth called the Hopu. These Hopu would climb down the sheer cliffs of Orongo, swim across the shark-filled waters to the islet of Motunui, and wait. Wait for the first egg of the Manu Tara. The one who found it and returned it safely, intact, untouched by sea or gull, would crown his patron the Tangata Manu, the Birdman. A title not just of honor, but of power. For 1 year, that clan's chief would lead, his word heeded above all others. The people welcomed the idea, perhaps out of desperation, perhaps because it offered a path forward that did not require stone or fire. It required only patience, skill, and trust in something that came from beyond the sea. When the time came, Kaipo stood among the watchers. She was older now, wiser. Her weaving had grown intricate, her hand steady even as the world trembled. Beside her, Ruki waited silently, his eyes on the sea. He had not been chosen as Hopu. He had not tried. But his younger cousin Tahi had. Tahi had eyes like the cliff hawk's, sharp and wide, and feet that seemed made for stone. He had trained for months, diving with the seals, running barefoot over volcanic rock until his skin became one with the island. The Hopu climbed down in silence, a line of brown limbs and steady breaths. The cliff face at Orongo was steep, jagged as broken promises. One slip could mean death, but none fell. Then the swim, a stretch of black-blue water, with only sky above and unknown below. On the islet, they waited. Days passed. Back on the main island, fires were kept low, voices soft. Every family dreamed of the egg, not for its shell, but for what it might mean, that the island still watched, that balance might still be possible. On the 5th day, a call echoed over the waves. A Hopu had found the egg. Tahi. Kaipo covered her mouth. Ruki clenched his fists, but not in anger, only awe. The return was slow.
One wrong movement could crack the egg. Tahi wrapped it in seaweed, tied it against his forehead with braided flax, and swam back under the gaze of gods and gulls. When he climbed the cliff again, hands bleeding, breath shallow, he placed the egg before the sacred stone at Orongo, unbroken. His chief, a quiet man named Aroha, became the Tangatamanu, a bird man, a leader not of warriors, but of watchers. For the first time in many moons, the people cheered together. Aroha spoke only one sentence in his crowning speech. Let the birds remind us, we are not only stone and earth, we are air and journey and return. The year of his reign was marked by small miracles, fewer disputes, a shared planting near the central plain. Statues were left standing. Children played together again at the foot of ancient Moai. Not all wounds healed, not all distrust vanished, but something fragile and essential had returned. Each spring thereafter, the ritual was repeated. The people watched the sky, their hopes tied not to weapons or walls, but to feathers and wind. The birdman would never replace the Moai, but he stood beside them, a symbol not carved from rock, but born from motion and faith. And high above, the Manu Tara circled, oblivious to their role in the hearts of men. They came, they nested, they left, and always they returned, just as the people hoped they would do, with peace, with purpose, with each other. It began without thunder, no great fire, no war cry, only the whisper of leaves that no longer grew. The forests, once thick and alive with the rustling songs of palm fronds, grew sparse. Their roots, which once held the soil like old hands gripping tightly, weakened, slipped. Rains came. The ground could not hold. The island sighed, and the land slid quietly into the sea. Kaipo noticed it first in the wind. It no longer carried the sweet scent of blossoms that used to fall like stars from the palm trees. Children no longer made boats from broad leaves. The older women no longer gathered nuts in woven baskets. The birds, some never returned. And the Moai, they remained, of course, but something had changed. They were no longer visited in the early light with offerings, no longer cleaned by gentle hands. Dust clung to their cheeks like forgotten tears. On a morning painted in soft grays, Kaipo walked alone to the outer slopes, where the statues faced inland toward the hearts of their people. She paused by one she had known since childhood. It leaned now, its base giving way to the erosion beneath. The earth no longer held its promise. She placed a hand on its cold surface, and for the first time, she felt its silence not as majesty, but as mourning. The Birdman ritual still continued, but even that too had changed. The clans grew suspicious. One accused another of cheating, another of theft. One year the Hopu returned with no egg. Another, two claimed the same prize. The Tangatamanu became not a voice of unity, but a symbol of a fraying trust. The land had given so much, but now it gave less. No more tall trees to carve canoes, no more fertile soil to feed all mouths,
No more songs sung in the evening light. Families began to drift, some to higher ground, others to hidden coves. Stone tools dulled. The great quarries where Moai once rose from rock were quiet. The carvers' hands grew idle, their eyes tired. And then the first Moai fell. Not toppled in rebellion, not shattered by outsiders, but eased to the ground by those who once raised them. No one spoke of it. There was no ceremony, just the slow, careful unbinding of a stone face from its platform, as if the people no longer believed it could watch over them. Kaipo sat beside one such statue, half buried now in earth and time. Ruki joined her in silence, his face older, lined by sun and salt. They shared no words, only memory. "They say we used to speak to them," Kaipo finally whispered, "and they listened." Ruki's voice was gentle. "Now we speak only to ourselves." In the distance, waves beat softly against the shore, a rhythm older than memory. And the wind returned, not with blossoms, but with seeds of something else. Perhaps longing, perhaps rebirth. No one could say. But the silence was louder now. That night, Kaipo lit a small fire, not for warmth, but for presence. She hummed a song her grandmother taught her, a lullaby about stars guiding fishermen home. No one answered, but perhaps the Moai listened still. Perhaps the land, though tired, still remembered. Perhaps decline, too, could be a kind of grace, if met with open hands. The next morning, a single green sprout pushed through the ash-covered soil, small, soft, alive. The ocean had always been both a protector and a boundary. For centuries, the island lay cradled in its vast embrace, its shores kissed only by familiar tides and the songs of seabirds. But on a dawn brushed with hues of soft pink and gold, the horizon held a new promise, the silhouette of distant sails, dark shapes cutting through the morning mist. Kaipo stood on the cliffs, the salt breeze tangling her hair. Her heart pulsed with a mixture of wonder and unease. The island, her home, was about to meet the unknown. The newcomers came in wooden vessels, their sails billowing like great wings. Their voices spoke in rhythms unfamiliar, words that floated strange and bright over the gentle crash of waves. They came not as invaders, but as explorers, curious and cautious. The Rapa Nui people watched, their eyes wide with silent questions. Would these visitors bring gifts, or would they take away what little remained? At first, the encounters were quiet, exchanges of gifts, shells for tools, stories for songs. Hands met in peace, bridging worlds with gestures and smiles. Kaipo found herself drawn to the strangers, their stories unfolding like tapestries woven from faraway lands. They spoke of vast continents, endless forests, and skies filled with stars she had never seen. Yet beneath the exchange, an undercurrent of change stirred. The island's quiet rhythm began to shift, its ancient pulse blending with the beat of new drums. Some elders whispered warnings. The gods might not welcome these new voices,
and the island's balance could falter. Others saw hope, a chance to heal wounds, to learn, to grow. The Moai stood silently, their stone faces weathered but watchful. They bore witness to this meeting of worlds, keepers of memories both old and new. Kaipo held on to the stories of her people and embraced the promise carried by the stranger's sails. For in the blending of past and future, the island's spirit remained unbroken, its mystery alive as ever. As night fell, the fires burned brighter, songs rose higher, and the island breathed deeply, ready for whatever would come with the dawn. The sun rose slowly over Easter Island, casting long shadows across the land and sea. The island awoke with a gentle sigh, as if breathing in the possibility of a new day. Kaipo stepped onto the shore, her feet sinking softly into the warm sand. The visitors' boats had returned, and with them came more than just goods. They brought ideas, languages, and dreams. Conversations bloomed around the fires, in shared spaces where stories mingled like rivers merging. The Rapa Nui listened, learned, and taught in return, bridging worlds with laughter and curiosity. The old ways did not vanish overnight, but they began to weave with the new. Ceremonies blended with unfamiliar songs, tools shaped by hands both native and foreign. The island seemed to respond as trees were planted anew, and gardens grew richer with new seeds. Life stirred in ways both expected and surprising. Yet change was never without shadow. Some hearts clung to the past fiercely, fearing loss, forgetting, or betrayal. Kaipo found herself walking between worlds, a guardian of memory and a seeker of hope. She spoke softly to the Moai, sharing with them her dreams for the island's future. The statues, silent as ever, stood tall against the sky, witnesses to time's unending flow. As days turned to months and months to years, Easter Island continued to evolve, not lost to history, but reborn through connection and resilience. In the stillness of twilight, Kaipo whispered a prayer for peace, for balance, for enduring mystery. And the island listened. As the seasons shifted gently, Kaipo felt the weight of history settle softly upon her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a sacred trust. The elders gathered under the great palm grove, their faces etched with wisdom and time. They shared stories by the flickering firelight, passing down the legends of the island, the Moai, and the people who carved them. Kaipo listened closely, each tale a thread woven into the tapestry of her soul. She learned of the spirits believed to dwell within the stones, of the chants that once filled the valleys, and of the harmony that once bound land, sea, and sky. With gentle care, she began to teach the younger ones, telling stories not just with words, but with songs, dances, and art, breathing life into memories that might otherwise fade. The island's past was not frozen in stone. It lived in hearts and hands, in the rhythm of footsteps on the earth, in the quiet moments shared beneath starlit skies. Kaipo understood that to be a guardian of the past was to be a bridge, connecting what was with what could be. Though the world outside grew ever closer, the Rapa Nui held tight to their identity, finding strength in their roots even as they embraced new branches. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Kaipo stood before a moai, feeling the cool stone beneath her fingertips. She whispered a promise to honor the stories, to protect the island spirit, and to carry its legacy gently forward. The statue seemed to watch in silence, a timeless sentinel guarding both history and hope. And as the stars ignited overhead, Kaipo knew that the past was never truly gone, so long as there who remembered.
The island breathed in the shifting winds, each gust a messenger from distant horizons. They swept over the hills and valleys, stirring the leaves of the palm trees and rippling across the surface of the ocean. Kaipo stood at the edge of the cliffs, feeling the cool breath of the wind against her skin. She closed her eyes and listened to the voices parried on the air, to the subtle murmur of change. The island was alive with new rhythms. Trade routes expanded beyond the known seas, and with them came new customs, tools, and stories. The people of Rapa Nui found themselves at a crossroads between preserving tradition and embracing the unfamiliar. Some welcomed the winds with open hearts, seeing opportunity in the unknown. Others held tighter to familiar shores, fearing the loss of what had always been. Kaipo walked among her people, her spirit steady like the moai statues watching over the land. She spoke softly of balance, the dance between past and future, root and branch, stone and sky. At night, beneath the glow of the stars, the island's fires burned brighter. Songs blended ancient chants with new melodies, telling stories of resilience, adaptation, and hope. The moai, silent and steadfast, seemed to lean into the wind, bearing witness to the island's unfolding story. Kaipo understood that the winds of change were neither foe nor friend, but a part of the island's breath, an invitation to grow while remembering who they were. As dawn painted the sky with soft colors, Kaipo smiled quietly, ready to face the future, carrying the strength of her ancestors and the promise of new beginnings. The island's pulse was gentle yet steady, a rhythm felt beneath the feet, in the whisper of the waves and the sway of the palm fronds. Kaipo wandered through the familiar paths, her fingers brushing over the rough bark of ancient trees, her eyes tracing the horizon where sea met sky in endless embrace. Here, in this sacred place, she sensed the true spirit of Easter Island, not just in the towering moai, but in the land itself, in the stories carried by the wind, and in the hearts of its people. The island was a living tapestry, woven from threads of history, nature, and culture. Each moment, each breath added color and depth to its ever-changing design. Kaipo knelt by the shore, letting the cool water wash over her hands. She thought of the ancestors who had walked this land, of their dreams, struggles, and love. She knew that the heart of the island beat strongest when its people honored their past, cherished their present, and embraced the future with open arms. The moai stood silently nearby, guardians of memory and hope, their stone faces timeless witnesses to the island's endless dance of life. As the sun dipped low,
painting the sky in soft shades of amber, Kaipo felt a deep peace settled within her. The island's story was far from over, and she was ready to carry it forward with gentle strength and quiet reverence.
The island stood quietly beneath the vast sky, its moai statues casting long shadows in the fading light. Each figure, weathered by centuries, held within its silent gaze the echoes of countless generations. Kaipo walked slowly among them, her footsteps soft on the earth. She reached out, placing her hand on the rough surface of a moai's shoulder, feeling the cool stone, the timeless strength beneath her fingers. These statues were more than stone. They were the voices of her ancestors, guardians of stories and spirits, symbols of a people's resilience and identity. Through storms and silence, through change and challenge, the moai had endured, standing as testament to the creativity, devotion, and hope that shaped Easter Island. Kaipo thought of the journeys that had brought her people here, the trials they had faced, and the new paths they were forging. She understood that legacy was not just about what was left behind, but also about what was carried forward, in memories, traditions, and the lives yet to be lived. As the stars began to twinkle above, the island hummed with a quiet energy, a promise that its story would continue, woven into the fabric of time. Kaipo looked up at the night sky, feeling connected to everything around her, the land, the sea, the stone, and the endless circle of life. With a gentle smile, she whispered a blessing for the island, for her people, and for all who would one day come to wonder at the moai and dream of the mysteries they hold. The legacy of Easter Island was carved not only in stone, but in hearts, an enduring gift to the world. Thank you for journeying through this story. May the gentle whispers of Easter Island bring you peace and wonder. Thank you for joining us on this gentle journey to Easter Island, where the silent moai stand as timeless witnesses to a remarkable story. As you continue to rest, may the peaceful whispers of the island and the echoes of its history lull you into deep, restorative sleep. Remember, every stone, every breeze, and every story carries a piece of the past into the present, and now into your dreams. Until next time, sleep well, and may calmness and wonder accompany you through the night.